So, you have decided that you want to learn how to crochet. Well, you've definitely come to the right place. My name's Jess. I've been crocheting for about 30 years, and over the course of those 3 decades, I've picked up tons of tips and tricks and a whole lot of skill that I can't wait to share with all of you. Today's video is going to focus on the absolute basics of crochet. The only assumption I'm going to make is that you have neither touched yarn nor touched any type of fiber art implement or tool. No hooks, no knitting needles, nothing. I'm going to assume that you have zero experience, and from there we're going to build. In order to do that, we're going to talk about 2 main chunks of information. The first thing I'm going to talk to you about has to do with materials. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that because as a beginner, the materials that you use need to be pretty specific. But still, I want to give a little bit of attention to that. The bulk of today's video is going to focus on 5 main skills that you need to have in order to both start and complete a project. The first thing I'm going to teach you is how to make a slip knot. Many of you may already know how to make one of those knots, but I think it's important to just go over it just in case. As I said, making the assumption you've never touched yarn. Because I understand that no 2 people learn the same way, I'm going to give you 2 different methods that I'm aware of in order to make a slip knot. And if neither of those techniques works for you, there are tons of other videos out there that can show you. Once we've mastered the slip knot, then it's time to start learning how to crochet. The next thing you're going to learn is how to make a foundation chain, which is what the rest of your project will build upon. I'll then teach you the basic single crochet stitch. I will teach you how to turn your work because the majority of crochet is worked in rows. So I'll teach you the right way to do that to make sure that your project stays nice and consistently one shape as opposed to angling in or angling outward. And then the last thing I'm going to show you is how to finish off your project and how to weave in your ends so that they're locked in place and so that no one will ever know that you've done any sewing whatsoever. This video is meant to be one of many. In subsequent videos, we're going to start to look at more technical aspects of crochet. We'll get into more advanced technique, more advanced stitches, more advanced patterns, and eventually the goal is to start working on very specific projects, very specific items. I'll mention one last thing before we get started with crochet. You can find me on Facebook by either searching for Knotty Habit Boutique, and that's Knotty with a K-N-O-T-T-Y, or you can click the link that hopefully will be down in the description as long as I can figure out how to get it there. The reason I'm giving you that information is because I really want to hear from you. No joke. Teaching is awesome, but it's only super cool when there's an interaction going on between the teacher and the student. So what that means is if you're struggling with something I'm trying to teach, if you just don't get it, shoot me a message. If there's something you really want to learn, you've seen something and you really want me to demonstrate how it's done, hit me up and let me know, because otherwise I won't know what you want to learn. And last but absolutely not least, show me what you're working on. If today you create something that you're super proud of because you've never been able to crochet before, I really want to see it. If a video inspires you to make something that you're really excited about, then by all means, send me a picture, let me know. I will put it on the Knotty Habit Boutique page. So, if all that sounds great, go ahead, subscribe so you get all the updates about when I post a new video, and follow me. Yay, it's one of my favorite parts of the process, going to buy yarn and the other materials I need in order to finish a project. You will be overwhelmed by all the different colors, textures, materials, just every possible thing you could imagine to use for a crochet project. But as a beginner, you're going to need to stick to a pretty basic type of yarn so that you don't get too overwhelmed with the process. The same thing's going to happen when you see all the hooks. They're made different ways. You have wood hooks, metal hooks, ergonomic hooks, plus they're mixed in with all this other fun stuff. Stitch markers, pom-pom makers, knitting needles. But again, as a beginner, you're going to only need one pretty versatile hook, which I'm going to talk to you about now. All right, so as I said, now it's time to talk about materials. And this is really, really important because there are tons of yarns and there are tons of hooks and lots of other complementary bits and bobs that go with crochet artistry. So when you walk into the store for the first time, whether it be Walmart or Target or craft store like Michael's or Hobby Lobby, you might find yourself a little overwhelmed with the amount of yarn there is to choose from. You'll see every color of the rainbow, all textures you could possibly imagine. You'll see acrylic, you'll see cotton, you'll see wool, you'll see wool-like, you'll see blends. If you go to a store with lots of specialty yarns, you might see things like alpaca. Do yourself a favor and put down the alpaca, okay? You are a beginner. You need to get something that's good for a beginner to work with because A, you don't want to break the bank on something that you don't know if you're really going to enjoy, and you're going to tear the yarn up as you're learning. It happens, you know, you're going to have to practice. And the other reason is you don't want to overwhelm yourself with something that's going to be difficult to work with. What you need to do is you need to go in focused. You need to go in saying, I'm going to ignore the pretty fine filament sock yarn because you're not ready to use the super tiny hook that it takes to work with this. You're going to ignore the beautiful homespun, super soft, oh, I just want to wrap myself in a cocoon of this yarn. You're going to ignore that. This is like a homespun kind of boucle texture. No, honey, you need to put this down because it is so hard, A, to see your stitches, and B, to work with as a beginner because you need a gigantic hook to work with a number 6 weight super bulky yarn. Put it away. Yeah, your best friend is going to be Red Heart Super Saver. Trust me. Here's why. First of all, it comes in tons and tons of pretty colors. Almost every color you could imagine, you're going to find it. Second, it is the perfect weight yarn to work with as a beginner. It's not so fine that you barely feel it in your hands and have to use a tiny hook, yet it's not gigantic, requiring that you use a huge cumbersome hook. It's just a nice texture. Speaking of texture, it feels pretty good too. It's a fairly soft yarn. It's not the softest that you'll find, but it's not bad for what it is. And oh my goodness, the price, you can beat it, but you're not going to get the quality, okay? This yarn, this skein cost me, I think, $3.49 with tax at Michael's the other day. Fairly sure I could get it for maybe $3 at Walmart. Let's take one little side trip to talk about Walmart. If you have a local Walmart at which you like to shop, you might find that they have their own brand of yarn. Do yourself a favor and put that away. You will be tempted to buy it because A, pretty nice colors just like Red Heart. B, oh my gosh, it's like half the cost. And C, at first touch, it feels pretty nice. Oh my, it's terrible. I'm going to be honest with you, Walmart might be upset with me, but I don't care. It's crap. You don't want that yarn. Because once you start working with it, you find that the individual fibers that make up the strand of yarn, they pull apart, they get all fuzzy, and it's terrible to work with. Put it away. It's not worth it. You don't want the $1.50 yarn, okay? Just stick to the Red Heart Super Saver. You will thank me. And while we're also talking about yarn, let's talk about colors. As I said, every color of the rainbow, and some colors that aren't in the rainbow, like my personal favorite, black. I love black. Do you love black? I love black, dark black, off black, faded black. Today, as a beginner, is not the day for you to be working with black yarn. You need something that's going to be very easy to see, very easy to work with. As you learn to crochet, you need to learn the anatomy of the stitches that you're working on, so you have to be able to see them. When you work with a black yarn or a super dark navy yarn, you're going to have a really hard time seeing your stitches. I work with black all the time, and I crochet sometimes at work in between some of my tasks that I have to do because it helps my eyes refocus. And black, for me, I've been crocheting for 30 years, I said. It's almost impossible unless you have this high-powered, million candle power light shining down on top of it to really show the contrast between the stitches. No black today. Not today. Pick pretty blue or pink or yellow or green, okay? Or even white, whatever. Just something bright. All right, so you have your yarn. Now we need to pick a hook. You will find tons of hooks, more than you would imagine, okay? You're gonna find, look, I'm grabbing my stack of hooks. It's not even all of them. You'll find teeny tiny little metal hooks. You'll find seemingly the same kind of hook, bigger hooks, but with these nice cushy ergonomic grips. You'll find gigantic hooks. Well, this isn't even gigantic. People are probably laughing. This is not gigantic. There's much bigger than this. But to me, this is super bulky. I'm not a fan of this. I use this one to make mermaid tail blankets with this yarn right here. They go perfectly together. You might, depending on the store you go to, even find pretty wooden hooks like this. Just a quick aside, this is my favorite hook. Maybe I'll put the link to this company down in my description as well. This is called a Furls Streamline hook. They're quite a bit more expensive than your standard metal hook, but oh my gosh, if you get into crochet and you love it and you want to keep going with it, do yourself a favor and invest in these. This one I think costs $17.50, but it feels fantastic in the hand. But like I said, maybe not yet, because you probably don't want to invest that kind of money to start out. And another reason, similar to the difference between wooden knitting needles and metal knitting needles, you need something that the yarn is going to slide off of pretty easily when you get started. So just do yourself a favor and stick with metal. Yeah, so tons and tons of hooks, and every shape, size, color imaginable. What do you need to know about a hook? Well, you need to know what size it is. As I mentioned, your yarn will have a label. It'll say, hey, use an H hook or use an I hook. This one here says, hey, use an N hook. What do you know? Guess what size hook this is? It's an N. For you to start, what works best for you is going to be to pick either a G or an H hook. This is the size of an H hook right here. This is a G hook so that you can see kind of the difference there. Not a whole lot of difference. And then this one here I do like to use quite a lot. It has this nice cushy grip, which I do recommend. This is a G plus hook. It's just a little bit bigger. Your standard G hook is 4.25 millimeters. This one is 4.5 millimeters. So it gives you just a little bit extra. Yeah, so run on out, grab a pretty skein of Red Heart Super Saver, and grab either a G or an H hook. These will work really, really well, and they're small enough where you can see some really nice stitch definition, but they also have enough size. They're not so cumbersome. They have enough size where you can really work with them. They feel good in the hand. So there you go. 2 more things you're going to need when you go to the store. One of them you probably already have at home. Scissors. You're going to need this obviously to snip the ends of yarn, to trim things off, unless you plan on using your teeth, which I wouldn't recommend. The little tiny fibers between the teeth, just not very attractive. The other thing you're going to need is a yarn needle, tapestry needle, darning needle, whatever. Very similar to your standard sewing needle, except you can't stick it through your finger. Well, I guess you could, but why would you want to? It's not ultra pointy, and obviously the eye of this needle is significantly larger than a sewing needle because it needs to accommodate the size of yarn. These come in metal and plastic, and sometimes you can get a pack with 2 different sizes. This would be one of the larger sizes. This is the one that I like the most. I've never used the plastic ones, but I don't know. Plastic and I just don't always get along. I have 2 young daughters. Plastic tends to break in a house with 2 rambunctious children. So anyways, there you go. Scissors, darning needle, yarn, and hook. Now you're ready to crochet. All right, we are ready to begin. I have my G hook, I have my worsted weight Red Heart Super Saver yarn, and now we're ready to start crocheting. Yay! Okay, so as I said, the first thing we need to learn is how to make a slip knot. That's how we get the yarn onto the hook in order to actually begin the project. Almost every crochet project that you do will begin with a slip knot or some form of a slip knot. So I'm going to show you 2 methods, one done using your finger and another method just done on a flat surface or whatever surface you want to use, your leg, that works too. All right, so I'm going to put my hook to the side because I won't need that just yet. We're going to start with the on the hand method. Now, when you crochet anything, when you factor in new yarns, you want to consider the fact that you're going to be sewing your yarn ends into your work. For that reason, I suggest always leaving at least about 4 inches of tail, because when you thread that through your tapestry needle and start weaving that into your work, you're going to want to have enough tail to do that without having to pull the yarn out and just kind of finagle your way through the project. So I'm going to leave myself about that much. That's, I don't know, that's probably 4 or 5 inches, something like that. I'm going to drape it over my hand with the cut end kind of on top here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this yarn, the piece that's kind of going back to the skein or ball, I'm going to wrap it around my index finger so that I make an X, just like this. There we go. I have an X. Okay? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of hold it so that it doesn't fall off my finger. And here is the goal. The goal to make your slip knot is to get this piece of the yarn here underneath this one so that it's pulling a loop out this way. I can do that 2 ways. I can do that by using my finger to just kind of grab it and pull it under, or I can use my hook to do it. So the way I do that is I just kind of tug on the strand, the part that's closer to the end of my finger, and I use whatever means necessary to get this one underneath it. I can push it under like this and grab it. See what I'm doing? I pushed it under. I can stick my finger under here and grab it, but that's a little trickier, but I still got it. Or if I really don't have the finger dexterity to get in there and grab it, I can use my hook. I can go in under that strand that's closer to my index finger tip, just kind of grab it and pull it through like that. Leave it on the hook if you do it that way, because then all you have to do to have your slip knot is you just kind of grab this piece down here and the back one going back to your skein, pull it tight. That is your slip knot right there, ready to go. All I have to do is tighten it up. I'm ready to begin crocheting.
I'll show you one more time. I've made the X, and now I'm going to pull it under. This time I'm just going to use my finger to do it. I tighten it. Just pull it like that, tugging on the loop and the free end. Stick my hook in the hole, grab the part that goes back to the skein, and tug. You're ready to crochet. Okay, slip knot method number 2 that I'm going to show you. This one is also very, very simple, and in all honesty, it might be easier to do if you've never made a slip knot. It's easier to visualize, I think, and manipulate the yarn when it's on a surface as opposed to strapped to your fingers. Okay, put the hook aside for a second. I'm going to form a loop using this yarn. The way I'm going to do that is just like that. You're going to make it look like, you know, one of those ribbons that you see, kind of like, you know, your awareness ribbons. Just like that. Make sure you have a long enough tail that you're going to be able to sew in at the end of your project. And what you're going to do is you're going to use this loop to make almost a pretzel shape. And the way that we do that is very simple. Grab the loop and fold it over on top of the portion of the yarn that's going back to the skein. Now you look, you have, kind of have sort of a pretzel shape. Now the rest is super simple. You're going to grab that piece of yarn, the piece that's right in the middle, just hold on to that with your fingers, and now reach down, grab both strands, the cut end and the piece that's going back to your skein, and pull them apart. There you go, folks. There's your slip knot. I put my hook in, just like that. I tug, and it tightens up onto my hook. Now I can start crocheting. I'll show you one more time. This one we'll do in slow motion. There you go. That easy. All right, now that we have our slip knot on our hook, the real fun begins. It's time to learn how to make a foundation chain. Yippee! Okay, I have my slip knot on my hook. I'm ready to start my foundation chain. Just a few recommendations as we start. You're going to want to make sure that your straggler end is kind of on the bottom when you're holding your hook. You want the working yarn on the top. That will keep this guy out of your way. The next tip I'm going to give you, and I do this with just about every project, you want your foundation chain stitches to be just a little bit bigger than a super tight stitch, because when you crochet, when you start your single crochet row into the foundation chain, if it's too tight, it's going to be really hard to stick your hook in there to grab the yarn. And as a beginner, you need to make this as easy for yourself as possible. Okay, so I'm ready to go. First, I want to show you kind of how I hold everything. When I crochet, I hold the stuff that needs to get out of the way, I hold that between my thumb and my ring finger. Right now, in this case, the straggler needs to be out of my way. I do not want to confuse this with my working yarn, because then I'll end up crocheting it in, and then I'll have to pull a bunch out and go back for this. So I just kind of hold it out of the way with my thumb and my ring finger. This yarn here, the working yarn, I just lightly hold between my index finger and my middle finger. I'm not squeezing it tight. I don't want this to be lodged in there so that it doesn't move. This right here is how you are going to keep your tension. It's how you're going to feed the yarn into your project. So it needs to move a little bit. What I do is I just kind of grasp it enough where I can pull the yarn through. Do you see how it pulls through? But it's not like flying through or anything like that. It's just, I can feel it. I feel like I have control over it, but I'm still giving it the freedom it needs to become part of what I'm working on. Okay. Well, now if I could get that in there, there we go, in the hole. Okay. In order to make a foundation chain, what you're going to do is essentially create kind of a braid. And that is going to be the row upon which everything else builds up. I do most of the work with my hand that is holding the hook. I take the hook to my working yarn and I pull it through. What you're going to be doing is creating a series of stitches simply by pulling the working yarn through the loop that's left on your hook. So the way I do this is I reach with my hook and I use the part that's, curved downward, the hook part, to grab my working yarn. I grab it, and sometimes I just kind of twist the hook. Do you see how I'm rotating the hook? I'm rotating it so that it has the working yarn, the piece right there, firmly in its grasp. It's not going to slide off. And then I pull it through that loop that was just on my hook. Now I have a new loop, and I have my first chain in my foundation row. Okay, let's try that again. Now, this is super important as well. You want to make sure that your chains, that your stitches are a consistent size, otherwise your work's going to look all out of whack. So I'm going to tighten this up just a little bit, just by pulling on the working yarn. I'm going to go back, grab the yarn, rotate it just a little bit so I have a firm grasp. I pull it through the loop on my hook. There we go, foundation chain 2. 3, 4. See how they all look the same? Nice consistent stitch. Okay, now I'm at a point where I'm kind of stretched here. My thumb and my ring finger are way down here. This is way up here. I don't like that. It's uncomfortable, so I have to adjust. I usually adjust my hand position every 4 to 5 stitches depending on the hook size that I'm using and the yarn texture I'm using. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to move my thumb and ring finger up. I'm going to grab the actual chain. No problem with that. I'm keeping it right where I need it so that I'm keeping the right tension on the stitch, or right tension on the yarn. Okay? Go to it and grab it. Go to it. Grab the yarn, rotate, pull it through the loop. Okay? All right. Now, I'm looking at this, and I don't like these 2 stitches right here. I don't like them. They're a little bit smaller than the ones that are back here. So what do I do if I want to fix something? Take my hook out, and I'm just going to pull my working yarn until I've removed what I don't like. There goes 1, there goes 2. Now I start over. Put the hook back in, make sure I have it the right size. Take the yarn, or take the hook to the working yarn, pull it through. To the yarn, pull it through. There we go. That looks much better in my humble opinion. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a chain of 20. And we're going to use that to make kind of your first little project, your practice piece. Okay, so just sit tight while I do this. First I'm going to count. I'm going to count my stitches here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9, so I'm going to do 11 more. There we go. I have a stitch, or I have a foundation chain now that is 20 chains long. Pretty, right? Super pretty. Okay, let's see what we have to do next. Okay, before we actually begin to learn how to single crochet our very first row, I want to show you kind of a basic anatomy of these stitches that you have right here as part of your chain. Okay, I'm going to pull this loop out so that way my work doesn't pull out, because I don't want that to happen. And we're just going to take a closer look at the chain. Okay, looking at it this way, they almost look like little V's or little hearts that are sort of connected to each other. If we flip the chain over, you can see these little bumps. Do you see little bumps on the back? Let's try to use my left hand to do something. I'm not very good with that. Can't even grab the yarn needle. Okay, these are the back little bumps. Bump, a bump, a bump, bump. Okay, sometimes you will be asked to crochet into the back bump of a stitch, but for our purposes, we're not going to do that because we're beginners. It does create a very nice effect when you crochet into those, but for now, we're going to worry about crocheting into the actual front of the stitch. So what you're going to be doing when you insert your hook, you're going to be inserting it into these little holes, these little spaces in the V. Just like that. You see where I'm pointing? I know it's kind of difficult to see. Let me see if I bring it up a little bit. Oh yeah, this is going to work better. Okay. So you're going to be sticking your hook into these spaces here, into those holes in the middle of each V or heart shape, whatever you want to call it. And when you do that, you want to make sure that your hook is going through the hole and also under this back bump. It will give you some more stability in your work. Okay, so what do I mean by that? All right. Okay, because I want my work to be a total of 20 stitches across, 20 stitches wide, I'm going to have to do something in order to make this turn up into my first row. Because we're doing a single crochet, we're going to need one extra chain in order to make the turn. So I'm going to crochet one more chain, and that stitch is going to be ignored for right now. We don't do anything with that because that's just giving us the room we need in order to get back to our chain 20, our 20th chain, in order to work our way back across. Okay, so here's the part where you're going to see where to put your hook. You're going to take this, you're going to bend it over, and you're going to put it down through the center of that second chain from your hook. So there's 1, 2. I go down through the center, and when it comes out the back side of the stitch, you want it to be under that bump that I was talking about. See, there's the next bump, the next bump, the next one. You want to make sure your hook is under that. Okay? Once your hook is under there, you're going to grab that yarn and pull it back through the stitch. Now you're going to end up with 2 chains on your hook, or excuse me, 2 loops on your hook. We take the yarn again, we grab it, and we pull it through 1 and 2. Now we're back to having only 1 loop on our hook, and we have made our very first single crochet stitch. Okay, now I'm going to go to the next one. I look, I have already worked down into this stitch. That one's done. So now I go to the next little V-shaped stitch here. I go down through the center of it, make sure that I'm underneath that back bump. I grab the yarn, pull it back through the hole. I have 2 loops on my hook. I yarn over. That's what we call that when we grab our yarn. It's called yarn over. Rotate it, pull through 1 and 2. There's our second crochet, our second single crochet. Again, next stitch. I can see where this one's been worked because I see where the yarn is going back down into that hole. So this is my next stitch. Go into the space, make sure I'm under that back bump. I yarn over, pull through, yarn over again, pull through 1 and 2. And if I look at the top of my work, I see another braid-ish portion. Those will become the stitches that we work into when we do our next round. Okay. Next stitch, I go in. You see how I'm holding this? That's actually a good thing to point out. The way I'm getting the hook to go through the easiest is I'm putting my index finger right on the bump of that stitch that I'm going down into. I'm putting it right on that little bumpy thing. Okay, so I'm holding it like that, and that I press my hook down kind of through here, through the hole. Oh, there's a good thing to point out. This piece right here that's going into the middle of that V, I'm going down through this hole. This piece right here becomes that back bump. So when I put my hook in, I'm trying to go in but also under that, because if I go in right here, then I've grabbed both of them like I want. So this is the space you're going to be going into. I'm going down through, pressing into my index finger, yarn over, pull through, yarn over again, and pull through 1 and 2. There's my 4th single crochet. One more time. Holding it nice and steady so I have some grip. Down into this chain, right there, so I've got the top of the stitch and the bump. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 1 and 2. 5 single crochet stitches are now complete. You'll notice that I'm doing the same thing I did before when I was making my chain. I'm holding all of this stuff steady. I'm holding this out of the way and firm enough where I can work with it, and I'm holding this with enough tension where my stitches are all pretty much the same size, which is really what you want. Okay, I'm going down through here, yarning over, pull through. That simple. Your work will curl up at the beginning. That's okay, because the more rows you do, the more it will flatten out. That's also another reason why you want to keep the same tension, because if you get too tight, it will make it curl even more than it should. Just grab a little more yarn here. And don't get discouraged with this first row. It can be a little tricky because you're looking for that back bump to make sure that you have some good stability in your work. the subsequent rows will be significantly easier to work. And as I said, the more you practice, the easier this will become. Before you know it, you'll be sitting in front of the TV doing this, barely even looking down at your work. Okay, I have 3 stitches left. 1, 2, 3, and there's where I kind of tied my knot. One, 2, and last stitch, 3. It'll want to get away from you, but don't let it. All right, there we go. Now, because I'm just learning, I'm going to do something very important. I'm going to count to make sure that I do in fact have 20 stitches. Because if you end up with more or less, your project, when it's done, will either, well, it's not, I'll show you later, but basically it's going to end up angling in or angling out, depending on if you add or subtract stitches. So you want to make sure. So I'm going to look at it, I'm going to count and make sure I have 20 stitches. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 right there. Right there, 20. All right, so we're good to go and we're ready for skill number 3, right? We've done slip knot, foundation row, and chain. So we're actually on to skill number 4 already. That's awesome. Okay, so what's up next? We're going to learn how to turn our work because chances are good you want something a little bit bigger than this. We're going to have to be able to work this way again. Okay, so stay tuned. Okay, so here we are. And as I said, we now need to turn our work and make our way back. I'm keeping this zoomed in because I really want you to see where I'm inserting my hook, and it's a little tough to see when I'm zoomed out. So excuse my fingernails if you see the paint that I got on them earlier from my project that I did this morning. So, okay, how do we turn our work? Well, just like down here, when we went to make our row across, we had to chain 1 in order to make the turn. We're going to have to chain 1 at this end as well to make the turn into our next row. So we already know how to do this. We just grab our yarn and pull it through that loop, and now we turn everything around. I just grab this with my right hand, pull this way, and now I'm back where I'm going to be working across this direction. Okay, where do we go from here? I'm going to pull this loop so I can show you up close. This right here, this is the chain that you just made in order to make the turn so that we could do row number 2. This chain you ignore because that's your room to grow. This is your very first stitch that you're going to be going into right here. And I want to show you the anatomy of this stitch because it's going to be different than your foundation chain. If you look at this, I'm going to take my yarn needle and I'm going to put it under the stitch. If you look, you have 2 pieces of 2 kind of loops that are making up that stitch. This one here, right here, is called your front loop. This one here is called your back loop. I bet you're shocked. Who on earth came up with those names? Anyways,
You don't really need to know that right now, but in future projects, in order to get texture in your work, your patterns might say single crochet into the front loop only, or single crochet into the back loop only. That's what that means. We will come back to that later when we do other projects, but I just wanted to point that out now in case you get really ambitious and start looking for a bunch of single crochet projects to work on. For our purposes today, we're going to be going under both loops of that stitch. Put my yarn back on my hook, get my tension back. Okay, so there's our chain that we're ignoring because it gives us our room to move. I'm going to take my hook now and I'm going to insert it into this space. Let me show you again here. If you set it on its side, you're going to see kind of spaces that seemingly are made just for your hook. Because they are. Here, 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 here. See what I'm talking about? That's where you're going to be putting your hook. Okay, so I have it on its side. I look, I ignore him. I go into that hole and I make sure that I have both parts of that on my hook. So I have like my loop here that goes back to my skein, and then I have 1, 2 parts of the stitch. I'm going to yarn over, twist it to grab it, and I'm going to pull it just under the stitch so that I have 2 loops on my hook. Now I'm going to yarn over again, and I'm going to pull through 1, 2. There is stitch number 1 for row 2, excuse me. We're not working in rounds yet. Next stitch. See, these are a lot easier to see than doing your foundation chain and doing your first row into that. I stick it into that hole. I look to make sure I have all of the fibers from both of those portions of my stitch. Grab my working yarn, pull it back under the stitch, yarn over, pull through 1 and 2. Done. If you're not sure where you have last crocheted, just take your hook and just kind of grab the stitch that's right and pull it. It will show you the stitch that you've just worked into. If I pull on this, I see this hole right here getting a lot bigger, so I know that that's the stitch I've just worked. And I know that the next one is going to be this guy right here. I have my work back in my hand. I'm holding my fabric this way, and I'm holding my yarn the same way I showed you before. I go down through the hole. I check. Yep, I have loop. Then I have the 2 parts of the stitch. Grab the yarn, pull it through. Grab the yarn, pull it through 1 and 2. You will be very slow when you begin. That is okay. You need to take your time. Okay, here's a good example. What do I do now? Somehow I got caught and I only have 1 little fiber from that yarn on my hook. We need to take care of that right now. I take my hook out, I grab my working yarn, and I pull it. Because believe it or not, that will look very unsightly if you leave it that way. You want to make sure you have all of the fibers on your hook. I'm going to tug this up so I make sure I grab them all, and then I pull it back to get my tension. In through there, grab my yarn, and through both. There's stitch number 4. I'm still using my index finger as a
point for my hook to reach, just make sure, like I'm actually kind of pushing my finger with it to make sure I'm all the way through. And you don't have to hold things just as I do. You're going to find you're going to find ways that are comfortable for you. And that's what's more important. I mean, I've been doing this a long time, so I'm probably a lot more kind of loosey-goosey with my yarn than most. But like I said, I've been doing this for like 30 years. So yeah, like if you need to wrap this yarn around multiple fingers in order to keep it steady, go for it. Whatever works for you. Okay, I'm getting real close to the end, so I want to make sure that I haven't done too much. Well, when I look at this, obviously I haven't gone far enough. Here's my last stitch of the row, and this one can be a little tricky depending on how tightly you crochet. You still need to get under both of the parts of the stitch. And if you look at it, let me turn it this way. Here is your front loop. That's pretty easy to see. Here is the back loop. It's down just a little bit, so you really are going to have to kind of reach for it. All right, make sure you get both parts. So I go under the front loop, and now I'm going to kind of dig down. Sometimes you have to dig in there a little bit to grab that second part. And now I do what I did before. And again, because I'm just a beginner, I'm going to count my stitches to make sure that I have still 20 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and the loop on my hook. I am good. I've got it. Okay? So, more practice. What do I need to do now? I need to turn around and go the other way again. Just like before, I need a stitch in order to make that turn without cinching it up on the edges. So I chain 1, turn everything around, and look, it's identical to what we had before. The same little holes that you're going to be working down into in order to create your third row. Don't forget, don't go to this guy. He's your chain. He's the reason you're going to have a nice, straight, consistent piece of work that looks like a square or a rectangle. If you start chaining into this, or if you start crocheting into this guy, you're going to start angling outward, and that's not good. Okay, so I skip that first chain. I go into the hole. Both of those parts of the stitch are on my hook. I grab that working yarn, pull it through. Boom. Okay. I'm going to keep on going to the end, and then I'm going to show you the very last skill, which is how to finish off a piece of work. Alright, I'm at the last stitch of my row. I'm going to do that like I normally would, only this time I'm calling it a day. I'm done. Okay? I just want a little tiny bookmark or something. So how do I finish this off? How do I get it off my hook and secured so that it doesn't unravel? Just like before, if we were going to turn, we're going to chain 1. Now, this yarn here, again, I want to have enough to sew in. So I'm going to cut it with at least 4 or 5 inches. Grab my scissors, here's where other materials come in. Snip, I'm done. Take your hook and just pull that thread all the way through. You've just kind of knotted it. It's not super secure, but we're going to take care of that with our tapestry needle. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take this, you're going to thread your needle like that. And I'll show you where I like to put this. If I look down here at this row, here are the tops of the stitch right here. And then you'll see that there are fibers that are kind of going down into the row beneath it, right? What I do is I take my tapestry needle. First of all, I figure out what the back of my work is. Here's the front, here's the back, okay? I'm going to take this needle and I'm going to insert it, not there, but right here. I'm just going to go under these fibers, but I'm going to be very careful not to let that needle go through to the other side of my work. Okay, see what I'm doing here? You can see the needle through those spaces, but if I flip it over, no needle, you can't see it. That's what you want. Okay, you're just going to go through fibers for, I don't know, maybe an inch is probably good enough. Pull that yarn through, just like that. Pull it out, and now stretch it back so that it's even. Okay, now this is not enough, because if you start tugging on this, it might pull this yarn out the other way. So we need to lock that in place. And here's the method I like. Because a piece of yarn can't be pulled, this piece of yarn can't be pulled in 2 directions at once, you need to make sure that what you weave in can't be pulled out in 1 direction only. So I go back through. This time I'm not going to insert my needle back into the stitch I came out from under, because, well, duh, that would just feed the yarn back through. I'm going to skip that one and go to the next and just kind of work my way across. Doesn't have to be super far, just under a few fibers. Again, it's not showing up on the other side of my work. Pull it through. Okay, now if you watch, if I pull this just right, it will start, do you see how it's pulling that yarn back through? I can pull it that way. It's starting to pull that yarn back through. That's not good. That means there's room for this to unravel. So I'm going to lock it in place now by going in the reverse direction one more time. Don't go under the one I came out from, because I'll feed it back through and pop out the other side. Nope. I'm going to skip it and go to the next and just get under a few fibers. Pull it through. And now, when I pull, there is no way that I can pull this. There is no direction I can pull this work where that yarn is going to come out of there. Because if I pull it this way, it's going to pull kind of all of it that way. If I pull it this way, it basically just can't unlock, because it's secured in there in 3 different directions. Grab my scissors and I snip it pretty close. And now, look at that, folks. You can't even see where that yarn was. And you can't tell on this side either. It's in there good. Then I do the same thing with my straggler. From the beginning, this is where I started my slip knot. So again, I just look, and this is up to you. I mean, you just find the place that looks the best for you to put it in, as long as you're staying on the side of your work that kind of isn't the best side of the work. in your opinion or whatever. But this method is actually so, I think, so good that it makes both sides look pretty okay. So I'm going under just a few of those fibers. I'm going to take the next two as well. Okay. Oops, I grabbed. There we go. Pull it through. Now if I tug it too hard, watch what happens. It starts to pull it and cinch it. You don't want that. Easy fix, just stretch it back out. Right as rain. Okay, not done, still have to go back and forth. And there you have it, folks. A nifty little bookmark, right? That's probably what I'll use this for. There we go, all done. Now, I realize that it is curving up on you and there are ways to fix that, but that's not for today. Isn't that fabric so pretty? I think it's so pretty. And this, you can see why I picked a bright color yarn, right? That was really easy to see. It's really easy to see the stitch definition. It's really easy to work with. That's why I said grab you some bright colored Super Saver yarn. Okay? Awesome. Congratulations.
Congratulations! You just finished your very first piece of crochet fabric. Maybe it's not your very first piece, but it's your first piece working with me. So that's something pretty spectacular. I'm not sure if you can tell, but it's gotten dark here. I've been working on this video all day and part of yesterday, and I have had an absolute blast doing this. I got to learn all kinds of new things that have absolutely nothing to do with crochet. I had to do battle with the iMovie software on the Mac, but in the end, Jess won out. So I want to thank you so much for being a part of this, and I cannot wait to get started on the next video. If you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe so that way you get updated the next time a video gets added. And please, please, please find me on Facebook because I want to see pictures of everything that you made today and everything that you make in the future. Thanks again for joining me. Can't wait to see you next time and can't wait to see you on Facebook. Bye-bye. On Crocheting Basics and
Soon. Oh God, this is so stupid.
Hi there. Introductory video.
God, this is so stupid.
Absolute basics of crochet. I'm going to make the assumption that you have neither touched yarn. So, come along with me and let's start.
Hi there, and welcome to my crochet.